In this video, I'm going to go over the top 5 mistakes that I see DIYers make and even some professional van builders. And make sure you stay till the end because number 5 could be catastrophic. So if you're building your own van, or maybe you just want to be able to interview builders and ask the right questions, then this video is for you. And at the end, I'll give you a bonus tip. That's a mistake I see a lot of DIYers make that can cause a lot of problems and delays during their build. So let's get into it. So we often get contacted by DIYers or sometimes customers of other van builders who are having problems with their vans and want us to take a look at it and help them out with that. And sometimes it's just questions that we get from DIYers who are kind of stuck in the conversion process of their van. So number 1 is insulation. There's a lot of debate out there on insulation. You can really get sucked down a rabbit hole once you start diving into it and researching this. There's a lot of options for insulation, but the biggest probably mistake that I see is just people over insulating. You know, the thing is about a van is there is no way you're going to be able to insulate everything. And the number one place that you're going to either lose heat in the winter or have heat come into the van in the summer is through the windows. And even if you have window covers on those, you're going to have the majority of your thermal transfer through those windows. So no matter what you do in the rest of the van, your windows are going to be the number one culprit. Now, the biggest place that you're going to see cold, especially in the van, and even some heat, is on the floor. So you want to take your time and really make sure that the floor is insulated some type. And what we've found is it really doesn't matter how much insulation you put in the floor, it's still going to be cold. So just do something that's reasonable. You don't want to build your floor up with insulation so high that you lose head space. The other mistake that I see on the floor is covering the entire floor in sound deadening material like kill mat. It really doesn't have any insulative value. And in order to deaden the sound, you don't need to cover the entire floor. And covering the entire floor with sound deadener just adds weight, expense, and time to your van conversion. Now, there's a lot of options out there. Some people will use some type of a spray-in insulation. And while this is probably the best, it does have chemicals. It also is a lot more expensive. And you're still going to have that thermal transfer through windows and other places that you just can't get to. So what we typically will do is use either 3M insulate or Havelock wool. We found that both of those are great insulators. So do your own research, but those are 2 that we really like. The number 2 mistake that I see a lot of DIYers make is not getting things square or plumb. This is something that's not necessarily easy to do in a van because nothing is straight and nothing is really square. You've got tapers front to back. You've got the walls taper from the bottom to the top. The roof is curved. The van is not level. And so there's really a lot of challenges with trying to get things square and plumb. So what we often see is cabinetry that is not square or plumb. Now, square obviously would be square, but plumb would be, like vertical to the center line of the van. But what we see sometimes is, for example, cabinetry that is not square, especially upper cabinets that maybe are angled inward or outward a little bit or tilted. So if you've ever done any building or construction, you know that it's so important to have things square and plumb. And there are tools that you can use in that. There's levels. There are plumb bobs that is a string with a weight on it that you can hang to make sure that things are exactly vertical, or a level with the vertical bubble so that you can put a level on something and make sure that it is plumb. Well, these don't work in a van because nothing is level, square, or plumb. So here's some things that we found that can really help out with that. Number 1 is when we start building a van out, we find the center of the van and we mark a line down the center of the van. You can use a laser to do this, or you can just find a point in the van in the back and in the front that where you can find the center. And sometimes it's just the embossings in the metal of the floor that you can find the center and mark a line right down the middle. Then when we're measuring to cabinetry and things, we measure from the center to the cabinets rather from the wall, because the walls are not going to be straight. They taper in at the back and at the front a little bit. So we use that center line constantly throughout the build to measure all those things off of. And it's a good idea also to mark a center line down the ceiling or the roof of the van, so that as you're putting in your ceiling strips, you can make sure that those get perfectly straight and parallel to the length of the van. The next kind of hack that we found is using a digital level. So a digital level is unlike one that would have just the liquid in the bubble, where there's no way to calibrate it. It's you set it down on level, it's always level. But with a digital level, you can set it on something that's not level, hit reset to zero it out, and now that's your new level. So even if it's not level, you can call that level. So what we do is we'll set it on something that we know we want everything to be parallel to. For example, the floor. We'll set that level on the floor, we'll hit reset so it zeroes out, and then we can set it on our counter, on our upper cabinets, things like that, to make sure that everything is parallel to the floor. You can even use this when you're installing exterior items like running boards. Running boards, you don't necessarily want them parallel to the ground, you want them parallel to the van. So for example, for the passenger slider, you can set that digital level on the step, zero it out, and then you can set it on the running board to make sure that the running boards are parallel to the step. And I'll put a link to the digital level that we really like in the description. Now, the next big mistake that we see in a lot of DIY vans, and even sometimes in professionally built vans, is not using the proper materials. Whenever possible, we use marine grade products, and you'll hear me mention this a lot, marine grade, marine grade. Why is that?
Hey, we wanted to jump in really quick and share something with you that Lisa and I are passionate about. We're both foodies and we love cooking and creating in the kitchen, whether we're at home or cooking in a tiny van kitchen. And one of our favorite hacks is using Thrive freeze-dried foods. Why freeze-dried? Because it's lightweight, requires no refrigerator, van life bonus, and lasts for up to 25 years. And because it's washed, peeled, and chopped before it's freeze-dried, all we do is scoop it out of the can and throw it into our dish. It's picked at the peak of freshness and then freeze-dried, removing the water, but leaving all the nutrients and flavor.
With fruits, veggies, meats, and dairy products, Thrive's got you covered. They even have complete meals. Just add water and your meal is ready in about 10 minutes, which is great when you want a quick one-pot meal after a long day on the road. Whether you want healthy ingredients for quick and easy meals, shelf-stable meals for when you are on the road, or you want to be more prepared in case of emergencies, Thrive could be your answer. Check out the link below for more info.
And now back to the video.
Marine grade is really the highest level of quality, durability, and even safety. And that's really what you want in your van conversion, even if it costs a little extra money. A lot of DIYers will use MDF or particle board. And the reason they do this is it's very readily available. It actually paints really well, MDF does. The problem with these materials is that they're not very durable. They hold a lot of moisture. When they do have intrusion by moisture, they will expand and bow and bubble. And in the case of MDF, it's really dense and heavy. Another problem with these materials is they don't hold screws very well. So if you're screwing into those things and then you have the vibration of the van, over time, those screws are going to weaken and the material could even break. And if you've ever had products from like IKEA, you know that they look great, when they go together, but then if you try to move them, it's very easy. If you just torque those just a little bit, the fittings will just break and the wood will just break out. And so that's a big problem, is using those kind of materials in your conversion. Another big one is fasteners. You really don't want to use nails in a van conversion. One is because just from the vibration, those nails can work themselves loose. But also, I'm going to talk about in a few minutes a little bit more, but you want to have access to things. So you want to be able to remove things and put them back. And so with screws, you're able to do that. Nails, you can't. We also always try to use stainless steel fasteners. You just want those both for the strength. They're going to be stronger than their zinc counterparts, but also they're not going to be affected by the moisture that you have in a van. Adhesive is another one. You know, when you're putting wood cabinetry together, you want to use a wood glue in addition to your screws. And this just helps everything to be stronger and avoid squeaks. But then also adhering things to the van. We always use marine grade adhesive. What we use is Loctite. And the reason for that is a lot of construction adhesive doesn't have the flexibility. And so with the vibrations, eventually that adhesive is going to crack, and those things are either going to come off or you're going to have squeaks and rattles. And then when it comes to the components, you really want to use marine grade, RV grade components, because if you're using things like lighting and switches and connectors and electrical components that are not made to be used in this type of situation, they're not going to last, and there could be safety issues. And I'm going to talk more about this in a few minutes. Number 4 is not leaving access. Now, I mentioned a few minutes ago about using nails. One of the reasons you don't want to use nails unless you absolutely have to is to have access. You want to be able to access things like your electrical components, wire connections, components like your water pump, your water heater, shut-off valves, all those types of things you need to have access to in the future. Even things in your ceiling, like your air conditioner and your fan, you want to be able to have access to those down the road. So putting doors and hatches anywhere that you're going to need to access things is super important. Now, by far, the number one problem that we see, and the reason that we're contacted by more DIYers than anything else, is electrical issues. A lot of people have spent a lot of time and money either building a van themselves or having someone else build it, and then they have electrical issues. So I mentioned earlier using marine grade components, and this is an area in electrical that you really don't want to cheap out. You want to use high quality marine grade products. Our go-to is Blue Sea whenever possible. Whenever they make something for a situation that we need, we use Blue Sea. Now, Blue Sea is more expensive than a lot of other products out there, but they have been tested and they're tried and true in the marine industry. So if they're good enough for the marine industry, they're good enough for a van conversion. Also on your electrical components, things like your inverter charger, your solar charge controller, your alternator charge controller, your solar system, all of those things, you want high quality products. We really like to use Victron products. We think they're the best products out there for van builds. Renogy is another company out there that makes good quality products. They're not going to be as good as the Victron, but if you want to save a little bit of money, then that might be a route to go. And there's a lot of other good ones out there, but our go-to is Victron just because of the quality, the customer support, and the seamless way that they integrate with each other. Batteries are super important. You want to use a battery that is high quality, UL listed. Don't go with a cheap China battery. You may have heard stories about lithium batteries catching fire and it's almost impossible to put them out. So you want to use a high quality battery. Ones that we like are SOK, Battleborn, Lithionics makes great batteries. There's several great battery builders out there, but this is an area you don't want to cheap out on. Now, when we see problems with fans, what we see is either really poor connections where they didn't use marine grade connections. Maybe they didn't use the proper tools to crimp those connections. Another one is not protecting the wiring when it's going over metal. So using loom, using zip ties or clamps to secure those wires up and away from metal. One thing that we do is we get rubber trim edging and we put that on the edges of the metal anywhere that that wires or plumbing pipes are going to be passing over. And then we also will wrap those in either a loom or some kind of sheath. And I'll link to that rubber trim edging that we use, as well as all the other products that I talk about in this video down in the description. So we see a lot of connections that have come loose. We see wires that have been chafed and rubbed and are shorting out. Big one that we see is improper wire size, too small a wire, not using marine grade wires, a stranded wire, using household wires in a van that are solid copper wires that can't handle the vibration. Big problem that we see is just using cheap China components, breakers, fuses, connectors. Those can just cause you problems down the line that are so hard to find, especially if they're inside of walls or ceiling that are not easily accessed. I can't tell you how many times we have DIYers come in and their reading lights aren't working, or the LED lights in the ceiling or something like that, and they've got their walls and ceiling are all sealed up, glued, nailed, and there's no way to get at them. So it makes it really, really difficult to troubleshoot any issues that you're having. Now, I told you I'd give you a bonus tip, and that's something that really happens more during the build and isn't necessarily a problem down the road. And that is wanting to get those big things finished so they feel the sense of accomplishment. And maybe sometimes it's just so they can go out and use the van. A lot of times we'll see the bare van with all the electrical installed on a wall, and they just wanted to get that all hooked up. They're so excited to do it. But it just can make it a lot harder to build out the rest of the van when those things are in place, or putting the walls and ceiling in before they properly run all the wires and connected everything. Now, I'll give you a little example. This week, we were working on a van that we're just in the final stages to wrap up. And when we do the walls, a lot of times we're using shiplap. And we bring the shiplap down to a point, and then we stop until we get all the cabinetry in, and then we finish the shiplap all the way down to the top of the cabinetry or the benches or whatever it might be. Well, we brought the shiplap down to where we normally do, but in this van, we're going to have a solid bulkhead across the front of the bed. And once we got that bulkhead all painted and ready to put in, we found we couldn't get it in with the shiplap. The shiplap came down about 2 inches too far, and we weren't able to get it in. So we had to tear out that part of the shiplap, get the bulkhead in, and then continue the shiplap down. So you really want to be strategic in your planning and your thinking about things. And that added an hour to our process because we had to pull that shiplap out. We had to scrape off the adhesive and everything. Then we had to get the bulkhead in. Then we had to put the shiplap back. And if we had just thought ahead a little bit better, we would have saved some time. Now, if you're building your own van, that might be one of the things you're wondering about. What is the proper order to build my van? We've done a whole video on that, and you can click or tap the screen to view that. We've also got a ton of other videos on our channel about van conversions, van products, van life. So consider subscribing and be sure to smash that like button. And we'll see you in the next video. Jeff with Thrive Vans. Thrive on. See ya.